My name is Annie, and I am the event coordinator for the Look Like a Leader workshop. Before we get started with the main event, I just want to take a few minutes to introduce the organization behind the conference, GWAMIT. GWAMIT, or the Graduate Women at MIT, is a student group whose mission is to promote the personal and professional development of women at MIT. The Leadership Conference in the fall is one of our programs, and we have others throughout the year, including the Spring Empowerment Conference, a mentoring program, other collaborative events, advocacy events, and more. So now please join me in welcoming Dr. Erika Ebbel Angle. She received her PhD in biochemistry in 2012 from the Boston University School of Medicine, and she holds a BS from MIT. In 2002, Erika founded and is CEO of Science from Scientists, a nonprofit whose mission is to promote student interest in STEM. Erika is also the CEO of Counterpoint Health Solutions, a biotechnology startup company aimed at discovering unique early prediction, disease progression, and therapeutic biomarkers in diseases such as Huntington disease. And Erika was Miss Massachusetts 2004 in the Miss America Scholarship Program. So again, join me in welcoming Dr. Erika Ebbel Angle. We're really excited to have you here.
You write those things so that you can confuse all the poor people who have to read them, and the sentences get longer and longer and longer. Thank you guys so much for having me, and thank you, Annie, for organizing this event. While the slides boot up, I'm going to do an ad hoc intro. I'm going to spare you of the presentation for now and just ask you a couple of questions. Why are you guys here? What do you want to learn? I want to make sure that I you signed up, right? Is there anything in particular that you want to walk away with after this talk? So I can make sure that I actually do that. What intrigued you? Yes?
I'm an expansion now, but I thought maybe something we have to talk about so actually into physics, and no matter what I do, when I interact with strangers, they never take me for a physicist, and I think that there's a serious mental hurdle for them to perceive me that way. And so maybe it's a little expansion to leadership, but it's all in the heading of drawing from others the impression you want to make.
Interesting.
Not to be misunderstood from who you are.
Okay. We will go into that. There will be an exercise about that. Yes. Yes.
I think for me, I wanted to find out that from a cultural standpoint, how can I make that leader? So before coming here, I was in India and I worked for 10 years. I moved in Boston. Coming here, being a American for the culture, I know it's important to know how to do that as a leader, learning the cultural aspects of life, so that lots of other information.
Well, that's an interesting point. I don't even know if there is a straight answer to that, because I think it always depends on you and your individual sense of self and personality. So both you and I would be different in how we present ourselves most effectively. So hold that thought, but I think there isn't necessarily one straightforward way of addressing that, though that's a really interesting point. We're getting there.
Almost there.
Yes.
My experience has been difficult to take it seriously.
Right.
I'm the only one in my group, or has been for a while, and I think that there's some sort of bias, right? No matter how confident you are, and you take it seriously, how to present yourself as a woman and also as a leader, I would be very, especially.
That's also a very good point. Also very challenging because a lot of that is perception. And you have to start asking yourself, what is the gain? I mean, will you ever change this person's mind, or is it mostly about your own sense of confidence? Because I know that for me, I've run into many different types of people, some of whom could have changed their mind about who I was and what I was, and some who will never change, ever, because that's just ingrained into their personal philosophy. So I think a lot of this is about personal development and you being in a place where you knowing that you have this sort of self-worth, but whether or not you'll be able to change everybody's sense of how they perceive you may be a little bit more challenging. And this is something that we all, I think all as women, will deal with. So it's a challenge, but also a very good point. All right, we have a presentation. Let me see if it works. It works. Wow, that's...
There's also a laser pointer.
I have one even built in. She's so high tech. All right. So in deciding what I was going to present to you guys today, because I don't have hours and hours and hours, but it's interesting to hear sort of the different topics you want to learn about. So if we don't get to them at the end, we can always discuss this as a group more. The topic is look like a leader, and that can mean so many different things. But we're going to talk a little bit about branding, personal branding, why is that important, how to effectively present yourself, taking charge of your brand. We're going to do a little activity where we give each other feedback, and I'm going to teach you guys how to give constructive feedback. There's constructive and destructive feedback, as it turns out, and this is actually a very important skill. As a leader, you have to tell folks that you interact with about the positive things they do, the negative things that they do, and ultimately you want those who you are leading to follow you. So how do you get that to happen? There'll be a little bit of time spent on this, which is an interesting topic. Dressing for success. I actually, it was a small part of the presentation. Annie wanted me to spend a little bit more time on it. It's actually very important, and it plays an integral role in my life, and I'll share a little bit with you about that. So we're going to have an introduction. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my brand, for what that's worth, and then you're going to learn about how to decide what your brand is. And that consists of 3 major parts. All right? What do you want to have happen? That is always a question that you have to ask. What is your right to play? And I'll explain all of this more. And then what are your key message points and tactics? Then there's going to be an exercise. You guys are going to get into groups and do an exercise. Then we'll get back together and have a discussion, talk about some of the additional details. We may bring up some of these other points at the end because they're not specifically built into the talk. And then that will be the end. So let me tell you a little bit about my life. I became interested in science when I was very young. Each of these slides has its own 15-minute story that goes with it. But suffice to say, when I was 11, I started working on an independent science fair project. I was looking at this plant that actually had the ability to kill the virus that causes herpes simplex type 1, which is the cold sore virus. And I started working on this project. This is one of my mentors who literally every day after school would come, and I'd go to the lab and he'd spend time with me, and he taught me about microbiology and immunology and chemistry. And I was 11, so I didn't know much back then, but he was very patient. And I remember the first time I went to see him, he gave me this stack of books, including the molecular biology of the gene. And I looked, and I think it was a little scary. And he said, well, read as much as you can, and I will guide you through it. And he became a very dear, dear friend and mentor, and obviously influenced me in many, many ways. So doing science fair was, like I said, an integral part of my life. I won a whole slew of the big science fairs, which was very, very exciting. But I was also, sort of the geeky kid at school. Let's see. Let's say no. Did I do something bad? No, not yet. And it was just an update. So this is actually me with Glenn Seaborg. Discovered Seaborgium element on the periodic table. He passed away a year after this photograph was taken. So yes, I was sort of the stereotypical geek at school. Didn't really know how to do my hair very well. As you can see, it's always in the same bun-like configuration. I owned one suit. It was black. And then I had this actually is the skirt that goes with this suit. So I kind of varied it up and wore one sweater too with it. But that was who I was, and I loved it, and that was very exciting. All right, let me see here. I spoke too soon about this working. Let's see. All right, something, it like detached itself. So anyway, suffice to say that as the sort of science geek growing up, was trying to decide where to go for college. Well, where do all science people come to school? You guys know the answer. We're all here. So applied early to get into MIT, got in early, continued along in the sort of the same general vein, doing chemistry work. Wish that I could have produced that as a painting. Perfect. All right, we're back again. continued on after getting my undergrad degree, went to BU to do my PhD work. Again, there's sort of a whole long story of crazy fate that led me there. But, was a scientist, and I love science dearly. Now, sort of on the opposing side, always had a hobby, and I was a musician, and I went to the San Francisco Conservatory of Music for many, many years. My piano teacher wanted me to go and become a pianist, and everybody knows there's no money in that. So decided that was just going to be a hobby, so I minored in music while I was at MIT. How many of you, are you grad students, undergrads? You're all grad students. Who here has a hobby that they do outside of school, whether it's music or art or dance or... Right, perfect. Don't give it up, because it's so important to have that other dimension, especially when you're in the lab or you're doing your studies all day and you have to come home and decompress and do something. Just really important to have that outlet. Then back in 2004, right after I graduated with my undergrad degree, something somewhat bizarre happened, and I ended up winning this contest. Again, there's a 10-minute long story that I could tell you all, and I might actually do that. It was right after 9/11, and we were all sitting around. I never watched television in my life. I was that kind of a geek. And we finally went out and bought me a TV tuner for my computer. And we were sitting around one afternoon, one evening, and flipping channels on the TV tuner, and the Miss America pageant was on, and I was there with a group of my friends, and they said, "You should do this." And I said, no. I'm not going to do this. So they went and they signed me up. So I get this email from one of the pageant directors saying, "You've been signed up to compete in this pageant. You need to bring a gown, a suit, a swimsuit." And my friends kept bothering me about it. "Why don't you want to do it? Are you afraid to do it?" So finally I said, "You know what, I'm going to try, because why not?" And in reality, there was a talent component and a component that involved community service, so I had been doing some work with kids and science. So I said, what the heck, we'll give this a shot. So I go in my one black suit and my one-piece Speedo swimsuit and, compete. And, of course, don't win. And afterwards was sitting around, and as a gift, everybody took me out to McDonald's afterwards for dinner. And they said, "Well, you're going to do it again, right?" I was like, "No, I'm not going to do this again." And they said, "Well, why not?" And of course, I had to admit, this is hard. This is not what I'm used to doing. I'm used to sitting in school and doing work, and that's all fine, but this was very, very different. This required different skills. And as I thought about it more and more, I realized how important those skills actually are. I think part of why you are here is to learn a lot of which I learned in participating in that program. So how do you present yourself? How do you answer questions? How do you dress? How do you walk? How do you know what to do? What's right, what's wrong? It's sort of that etiquette side of life, which this is a wonderful institution, but they just don't teach it here. So I kept trying, and eventually I won one of the local pageants. I had to, fix the wardrobe, fix the hair, fix the walk. It's very military in the way that I walked. And eventually, on my third try, it took me 3 years, I won. So that was very, very exciting. At around the same time, I started this nonprofit, which is called Science from Scientists. We send real scientists into the schools to teach curriculum-relevant lesson plans. And right now we work with over 3,500 kids per year in Massachusetts, have a staff of about 30 folks who work for me. And it's very, very exciting because you get to see kids who may not normally have been excited about science change their minds and start performing on a different level. And for me, when I think about what really made me want to be a scientist, it was those great hands-on experiences that I had as a kid. So, like I said, we send real cool scientists into the classroom during school. It's a year-long program. We teach around 20 sessions per year. Every lesson plan is based on the frameworks because we do come into the classroom to teach. We do have quantitative measurable impact. Gave you that number already. We also have a program now to help train classroom teachers, which is really useful because a lot of the classroom teachers that we work with actually have no science training. So they're told, teach this science class, but they've never taken science. So as you can imagine, that is a problem and a challenge. We also have a way to engage parents through our website to get them to do activities with their kids, which is really, really important. Other things, we actually piloted this crazy idea called the Dr. Erika Show with Comcast. I am a tiara-wearing scientist. It will become more important when we start talking about branding. But the goal is to get kids excited at a young age about science by sort of dispelling the traditional stereotypes about what a scientist is and what a scientist looks like. And that's been reasonably successful and popular, and so we're trying to figure out what to do with that next. We also, it's a nonprofit. It means that I have to go out and beg for money with Allison, who's sitting right here, who's my development director. I bring her everywhere we go. It's just, and it is a challenge. So you have to figure out what the benefits are for the people who are helping you and donating money. And we go out every day and we beg. Right now, I'm in the process of starting another business, because one business is never enough. You guys will, as you go through life, you'll see that once something is rolling reasonably well, you'll decide it's time to take on something else. And it's a biotech company, and we just incorporated yesterday, which is actually very exciting. We're going to look for biomarkers of neurodegenerative disease. Is anybody here? So chemistry, biology, only a couple. So basically what this is I can take samples from diseased patients and control patients, and I can compare them in ways where I can study things that other folks cannot. And in learning about these differences, I can then use the differences and the changes in those differences as treatments, basically to bring back these compounds which are missing in these people. So it's a very over sort of homeopathic approach. But it seems to work, which is very exciting. And this is sort of some of my PhD work. So we're very excited about that. All right, so now you know what I do, because in order for me to talk about what my personal brand is, I had to tell you a little bit about what I do. So what is a personal brand? Well, personal brand is the essence of how people would describe you. If you ask somebody to describe who you are, that is your personal brand. So an example, all right? I was lucky enough a couple of years ago to meet Sally Ride at an event. She had an event here in Boston. She actually runs a charity to get kids interested in math and science, Sally Ride Science. And she was doing a tour around the country, and she had different panels that she arranged, and I was on one of those panels. I was very fortunate. She was a really, really wonderful lady. This is an ad that she did for Louis Vuitton. I don't know if you guys have ever seen that. But when you think about her brand, right, first American woman in space, pioneer, big proponent of education, and she picked Louis Vuitton, which is a sort of high-end bag, shoe, clothes company to associate with. This was a really neat campaign. They had all the different, a whole bunch of different astronauts in this campaign. So how do you begin thinking about your brand? Now, I had already said, what do you want to have happen? What are you trying to accomplish? What do you want this brand to do for you? When you interact with someone or a group, how do you want them to react to you? And that is your brand, all right? So you have to think about these things. Think about pop star. You look in pictures, they're dressed crazy, or they do crazy things. A lot of that is because that is their brand. They want to be remembered. Lady Gaga wears crazy clothes for a reason. That's part of her brand. She has crazy hair because you remember it. You may think it's crazy, but you remember that. So, as an example, when people walk away, do you want them to say, she was serious, she was fun, she was whatever? What adjectives do you want people to use when they describe you? And then we come to the right to play. So what do I mean by this? So, based on this impression that you want to make, what are the accomplishments that you have had in your life that could be used to convince people or argue that your brand is justified? So you'd have to think about, what are the things that you have done, the experiences that you have had, that allow you to have that brand. So education, awards, travels, hobbies, talents, unique skills, unique experiences, we've all had them. This could be part of the whole cultural thing. Your brand may be exclusive to your own cultural experience. It may not have to do anything with the whole American cultural experience, which is, who knows what that is anyway. Everything is different. We'd have to go into that. Then, key message points and tactics. So what are the things you want to convey in the speeches, in the conversations that supports this brand? So who are you? And these are actually really hard questions. Most of us never really stop to think about who we are. What are your values? What's important to you? Your choice of attire. Choice of attire matters a great deal. Your presentation style matters a great deal. My whole life, they've been trying to put me behind a podium. Everywhere I go, there's a podium. And I can't do it. It's just not what I do. I think I'm not tall enough, too. That's part of it. So we're going to spend a little bit of time on this just because it's actually important. All right? What do I wear? Has anybody here ever wondered what to wear to an interview, to an event, how to dress? Back when I used to have my one black suit, it was very easy. When I started competing in the pageants, they looked at me and they said, that has to go away, that black suit. They actually said I was scary in black. Speaking of personal branding and the perception that you give people. So then they put me in purple. And I remember when I went to try on clothes, I tried on all the different colors. It's actually very important to do. Try on a pink, a purple, a red, a black, a gray, because there are colors that will work for you. There are colors that won't. And depending on what color you wear, it sends a different type of message. So I was in like a lavender and a yellow. I had two suits for competition. I wasn't allowed to wear white because I was a scientist, and a scientist in a white suit made me look like I was wearing a lab coat. And I wasn't allowed to wear black because black is scary. And I guess I was scary enough as it was, so I didn't need a black suit. There is a time and place for everything. And I say that all the time. You have to know your audience, and you have to know your body type. We're all different. There are ways of enhancing the things we like about ourselves, covering the things we don't. Part of what the pageant taught me was how to do that. When I started, for a couple of years after I was done, I started running my own local pageant. I actually ran the Boston-Cambridge pageant, and the winners would become my little, apprentices, I guess. I had to take care of them and dress them up, and we'd go places, and I'd say, that yes, no, yes, no. And it was all based on what made them look good. But I like that one. I'm like, I don't care if you like that one. That one doesn't make you look good. I mean, you have to know these things. These are all planned. If you're going to an interview, you wear a suit. Either a pantsuit or a skirt suit or some kind of coordinated outfit. You don't show up in flip-flops. Made the mistake once of showing up in a pair of shorts, even though they were very nice shorts. But they were shorts. So I was corrected very quickly. It was also 100 degrees outside. And anyway, I know. See, there we go. See? You want to stick with classic. Yeah. It's all right. Sometimes everybody needs to be reminded of these things. You stick with classic styles and colors, probably blacks, blues, and grays. There's controversy about whether red is too intimidating or not. And again, it depends on you. I think if you go and you decide that this works for you and you're, I'm kind of a pushy person, so me in red can be a little like, but, you may be more laid back. Red may work very, very well for you. Skirt length, usually just above the knee or below the knee. You don't want to show up in like one of those. And dress appropriate. And the most important one is really not too old. The tendency these days is for us to dress too old. We're not old. You don't want to look like you're 50 years old, but you also don't want to look immature. So, it's walking this fine line between being professional but with a twist. Or if you feel more comfortable in just something plain, you go for that. Yes, it was interesting. Yesterday I was reading about elegance. It was bizarre. I Googled elegance, and this whole article came up on Google. And the number one most important thing that people judge you on is posture. And, being lately that I've been doing this more and more, my whole back has been rounding. So I'm trying to figure out how to stand up straight. But stand up straight. And I was actually going to do a demonstration of this for you. Me walking through the door like this into the room, or like this into the room. And I think it gives a completely different impression. So, and it's hard to remember that, but just remember that if you walk in like this, it sends the message that you're afraid. If you walk in like this, you command the space and you command the room. What is appropriate? If you're going to a beautiful dinner, it's appropriate to wear a beautiful gown and clothes. One thing that's very upsetting for me these days is you go to the symphony or you go to the ballet and people are wearing jeans. I find that to be very disappointing. It's appropriate to dress up for certain events. And frankly, it's fun. I did the pageant because I like to dress up. It's fun. It really is. When you get good at it and you enjoy it, it's great fun. What are you comfortable with? If you don't know how to walk in high heels, don't. Or practice. You can practice. I used to do that. I put my shoes on. I was in my dorm or in my apartment, and I'd walk around in them. And you have mirrors. You can look at yourself as you walk, and you can decide how to do it. It's just practice. There's no rocket science. What you do on a day-to-day basis is much more complicated. It just takes time. And you know your audience, the age, the gender, etc. It matters. Women evaluate each other very differently than men. How old that person is will change the way they interact with you. And this was part of your point, which is sometimes you may not be able to change a perception because that's been ingrained. Some of the older folk that I deal with are used to women being homemakers. That's how they grew up. That was their perception. And I remember my parents were visiting. We were at an antique store, a local one. And the guy was an older man, and he was a retired professor. And he said to me, we were just chatting about what we were doing. He said, "You want to go to grad school? Why? You're just going to go get married." And so I looked at his hands, and I noticed he was married. I said, "You're married, right?" "Yes." I said, "Well, you went and you became a professor, right?" "Yes." "So you're telling me that if I get married, you just assume that I'm going to drop everything after all these years?" He was thinking. It's a double standard. I said, "That's a double standard." But that was the society that he grew up in. And that was it was just his knee-jerk reaction to the situation. And so sometimes also not taking it personally and walking people through it helps them to see the mistake. And then sometimes, you're just not going to change them, and you leave them alone. And you say, "That's fine, thank you for your contribution to this conversation. I'm going to go and do something else." So those are my professional dress advices and my style advice. Again, we could run our next class on how to dress, and it would be great fun, but I think this is not the topic of today's conversation. So let me share with you my brand. And I actually had to think about this. This was interesting in preparation for this talk, which was good because I've been asked this question more and more. What should people say and think after interacting with me? What's my right to this brand, and what are my key message points and tactics? So, as the CEO of Science from Scientists and Counterpoint, the host of this slightly wacky television show, really my brand is the primary PR driver for the nonprofit and for Counterpoint. So it's important that I have a clear idea of what that means. So here's what I decided I want to be known as. Number one, I want to be memorable. To be known as being educated, well-rounded, a leader, slightly over the top. I think it's always good to be just at least in my case, just a little over the top. Fashionable. So what are my rights to this brand? Well, I've got an undergrad degree from MIT and a PhD. I was Miss Massachusetts, so in a sense I have been a princess once. Note the smiley face. Leadership experience. I started Science from Scientists about 8 years ago, and we've grown from being an organization of 1 to an organization of 30. Now starting up the biotech company with a very cool group of people. One of them was one of my professors in my PhD program. And I've had some experience in TV and commercials and with public speaking. So if I had to write down why I feel I have a right to that brand, these are going to be 4 of the big bullet points. So what are the key message points? Well, when talking about accomplishments, I like to stick to the facts without embellishment. So that sort of goes with educated and leader. I like to steer conversations away from being pigeonholed, because the tendency when I walk in is for people, yes, to automatically believe that I am a bimbo. This is what happens. It's life. If you're going to look nice, people are going to assume that, because that's just stereotyping. So you like to steer conversations away from that by showing that you have a diverse set of interests, that you have skills and talents. So, if you're, yeah.
Can you find a synonym for pigeonhole?
Being almost like stereotyped, or being put into the box of being a certain type of person. Yeah, no problem. But by the same token, you want to be memorable. You want people to walk away saying, yeah, okay, that's what I thought she was going to be, but that's not what she was. She was very different from what I thought. I am more than willing to offer up opinions, including controversial ones. This is a choice that I make. How you present them is very, very important, but I will do that, and that is a choice. Some people, you may opt out and say, sometimes it's just not worth going there. I make the choice to say what I think, but I am careful about how I do it, because I know that there's an audience and people have different values, and I respect that. But it's part of who I am to offer slightly controversial opinions. And that kind of goes with being a leader. When you're a leader, most of the time people don't always agree with you, and being slightly over the top. Nowadays, when I try to figure out how to dress, I didn't know exactly how to explain this, but I call it professional princess, meaning that you think about what the Duchess of Cambridge wears, or the Princess of Sweden to an event, all right? And I've done this, and you may do this. When you go home and you decide what your brand is, you're going to Google a person who you think follows along the same lines with you, and you may look at what they wear. You may look at how they behave. You may look at all these things. And it's not, you may laugh, but in a sense, it's actually very important, and it's good. It helps. So you go online and you Google Catherine, Duchess of Cambridge, and you look at all the images and the types of clothes that she wears to events. So she's got dresses, and she's got suits, and all these crazy hats. So no hats for me. But you want to be classic, memorable, fashionable, and slightly over the top, and that's basically what those kind of folks wear. So this is something that is going to be part of your exercise today. You're going to think about this, what you'd be wearing in different contexts and different situations. So, all right, so now we get to the exercise. For starters, are there any questions before we do this? Yes?
Just an example of one of the pieces of controversial
So my participation in the Miss Massachusetts pageant will forever be controversial. It's been 8 years since I've done it, and yet whenever I go places, people won't remember where I went to school. They have no memory about anything. I mean, they won't even remember that I have a PhD. The fact that I went to MIT, meh, but they will remember, and they'll say, that's Miss Massachusetts. And there are a lot of people who, pageantry is controversial because of what some people think it stands for. Having done it for all these years, it's a much smaller deal than what everybody kind of makes it out to be. And a lot of the girls who compete do so to improve. I think But some people you're not going to change their mind about that. They will always believe what they believe. And it's just not worth, it's not worth the time. When the TV show came out, and a lot of time went into deciding whether or not I was going to be the term was coined of being a princess scientist. And the kids actually coined that term. We did not. But that's what a lot of the little girls who watched it, they all wanted to be princess scientists. And that started, it was on Facebook and on Twitter, and then suddenly I get phone calls from the press. You're the princess scientist. Okay, fine, I'm the princess scientist. And, then there were a lot of women who said, well, that's, you don't want to be the princess scientist. That's sending the wrong message. And I said, well, why? I mean, who cares? Is it a big deal? If a 3-year-old watches the show and wants to be a princess scientist, let her be a princess scientist, if that's going to make her like science more. If not, then not. I mean, the show isn't going to be for everybody. It's just like people who watch Bill Nye. Some people might like Bill Nye. Some people might not like Bill Nye. But, nobody's going to call up Bill Nye and say, you have a red bow tie. That's just, the fact that I had this crown was so controversial for people to comprehend. But, when I used to compete, I was asked all sorts of questions. What do I think about abortion? What do I think about the war? And some people, including most presidential candidates, don't answer those questions very clearly. They're told not to, but you can have an opinion. You just have to be able to justify it. And, you can't say, well, I'm right and everyone else wrong. What I believe is this, and this is why, and take it for what it is. And I was asked about stem cells on one day in front of a whole bunch of pro-lifers. It doesn't get much more controversial than that. So, but I'm not going to say, no, I never said that, or no, I'm not going to talk about that. No, that's what I believe in. But I respect your opinion, even if you're not that on the same page with me. Yeah.
So in some ways, a brand would be different sex, and other ways they also can make it evolve by your own perspective.
Absolutely, as you evolve.
Situations in which your brand has evolved, or the situations how you evolve.
If you're asking me what I'm going to be doing in 5 years, that's a very difficult question, and I don't know the answer. Yeah, right. Oh, man. Yeah, well, so that's a great question. It depends, right? With the bringing in of the biotech, which is going to be a more serious side, things may shift more serious. But for example, so what I'm wearing now, all right, this works for everything because it's got a little twist that ties in the back. It's professional. It's below the knee. It's gray. But it's also not boring. So I think you can find ways, depending on what you and who you feel you are. I would hate to just wear a plain black outfit and go out there and just say, hi, everybody. I run a business, and I'm not particularly memorable in any way. It's like that. Got a little bit of something going on. And it's a personality thing and what I'm comfortable with. But I don't know the answer to that question. Everybody asks me, and I'm not sure. Yes?
So we interact with people every day and everywhere we go. I was thinking the personal, when they choose clothes, for example, will one do it whenever he want to leave his room, or it's just for like formal when they go out?
That's interesting. So there are different opinions on that. There's one opinion that says you must always think about who you might meet, because you never know. What happens if you run into whoever you most admire and you are wearing sweatpants that day? How disappointing. There's that belief, and I think there is some value in that. Me personally, I don't do this because I haven't gotten to that point yet. I think maybe if you become someone really famous, then it matters every day what you wear, and because otherwise the paparazzi will come and take pictures of you and say, boy, that's ugly. But I would say, if you're going to go out where and you want to feel better about yourself, dress up. It really does make a difference. I know that when I put a little effort in, you actually feel better. But do I do it all the time? No. I'm lazy too. Yes, in the back.
So, several things like you
that's fine too. I mean, I think as long as it's not too much of a stretch. Like, for example, if you wanted to be a general in the army, you just don't start wearing clothes that the general wears, right? But I think if you decide you want to be, and you probably have in your mind an example. But yeah, I mean, you want to dress for what you think you want to be as well, because I think that helps get you into the right mindset. This is the kind of person I want to be. I'm serious about what I want to be, right? If you go for a job interview, you're trying to show people that you want to be what they would be hiring you for. So yes, just don't take it too far. Yeah. All right. If there aren't any other questions, then here's the exercise. I'm going to give you guys a chance to articulate in writing a brief description of a personal brand. I'm going to give you a chance to share this brand by answering some questions in a mock interview format. And the interviewing panel is going to use a special type of structured feedback. It's called SBI, which is Situation Behavior Impact, to convey their impression of your brand. All right? So I'm going to just give you one slide on giving feedback. And this works really well even when you get married, in the way that you communicate with your spouse or with your significant other or even with your friends. We're not taught how to best express ourselves in a way that's not sometimes offensive. And when we get angry, I know when I get angry, I say things anyway. But I will give you this lesson because it's important. But what you want to do if you are giving feedback is to convey how what that person said and did impacted you, as opposed to ascribing intent on that speaker. So what does that mean? So ascribing intent is saying, you did this, or being sort of accusatory rather than saying, so let's just do an example because that's easier. So an example of a negative SBI. So the interviewee wants to be taken seriously, but spends the interview giggling and twirling their hair, etc. Interviewer says, you're not taking this seriously. Which is bad, because it ascribes an opinion to the person. You're being thought police. You don't know whether that person was taking it seriously or not. Maybe they were. Instead, when you twirled your hair, so you're telling them what you did, it made me feel like you weren't being serious, which is what you were trying to accomplish. So you are talking about your feelings and how what that person did impacted you, rather than trying to figure out what they were thinking. And we have a tendency when giving feedback to do the first.